We all want to believe that our parents did the best they could. And maybe they did. Maybe they truly gave everything they had, with the tools and understanding available to them at the time. But what happens when the choices they made, the words they said, or the ones they never dared to speak, the gestures they expressed, or their lack of presence altogether, continue to shape and even haunt our adult lives? What happens when we look back and begin to realize that the weight of their influence is still with us, affecting how we love, how we trust, and most of all, how we treat ourselves? There is a kind of silent pain that very few people are willing to acknowledge. It's the pain of having been hurt by those who were supposed to protect us. This pain is hard to admit, let alone confront, because it hides behind layers of excuses and cultural justifications. We hear phrases like, "That's just how things were back then," or "They had a tough life," or "They didn't know any better." And while these statements may carry some truth, they don't erase the emotional wounds left behind. The hurt remains, quietly influencing how we connect with others, how we set boundaries, and how we perceive our own worth. Carl Jung, one of the most influential thinkers in psychology, dedicated a significant part of his work to understanding how our childhood shapes the human psyche. He believed that the experiences we have during our formative years leave a permanent imprint on our unconscious mind. According to Jung, what we do not make conscious will continue to direct our lives from the shadows, and we will call it fate. Many of these unconscious forces, he argued, stem from the relationship we had, or didn't have, with our parents. Maybe you grew up with a father who was emotionally distant, someone who was physically there, but never truly present. And now, as an adult, you find it incredibly difficult to open up emotionally or to believe that people won't abandon you. Or perhaps your mother was overly critical, and now you live with an inner voice that constantly whispers, "You're not enough." Maybe you learned at a very young age to be a people pleaser, to suppress your own emotions, your desires, your needs, because every time you dared to express them, you were met with disapproval, silence, or even punishment. These wounds don't disappear simply because we age. They don't vanish just because we've learned to function in the adult world. They remain buried deep within us, hidden in the shadow parts of our psyche, quietly influencing our emotions, our choices, our relationships. That's why, no matter how much we try to move forward, we often find ourselves trapped in repetitive cycles, living out the same pain in different scenarios over and over again. It can feel like life is pushing us into an endless loop of emotional déjà vu. But here's something crucial to understand. Healing doesn't begin by pointing fingers or assigning blame. Healing begins with awareness. We cannot change the past, but we can change how we relate to it. Forgiving our parents does not mean excusing their behavior or diminishing the pain we endured. It means releasing the burden we continue to carry. It means breaking the cycle so that it doesn't continue with us, so we don't unconsciously pass it down to our partners, to our children, or even to ourselves. So, how do we begin this process? How do we truly forgive and heal? First, we must recognize the root of the pain. We must come to terms with the fact that our childhood experiences have deeply shaped our adult identity. Only when we fully acknowledge how those early experiences molded us can we begin to untangle the emotional patterns that are no longer serving us. Our childhood doesn't just disappear because we grow up. It remains alive within us, echoing in our thoughts, reflected in our relationships, hidden in our fears, and repeated in our behavior. It is in childhood where the first seeds of our beliefs were planted. Beliefs about love, trust, safety, and our own self-worth. If those seeds were planted in soil, filled with neglect, fear, criticism, or abandonment, then their roots still run deep into our adult lives, even if we don't see them clearly. Jung explained that the unresolved issues of our childhood continue to manifest unconsciously throughout our adult lives. This means that the emotional atmosphere we grew up in, the praise we did or didn't receive, the love we had to earn or were denied, the boundaries that were either too rigid or non-existent, becomes the blueprint for how we experience life as adults. We may not remember every moment of our early years, but our current emotions, reactions, and coping mechanisms are living reflections of what we absorbed back then. Think about this. A child who felt that they had to earn their parents' love by getting perfect grades, being obedient, never expressing anger or sadness, will likely grow up into an adult who constantly seeks validation, someone who fears rejection, who tries too hard to be liked, who believes deep down that their value lies in what they do, not who they are. Not because they consciously chose this way of being, but because their unconscious mind learned that this is how love works. Or consider a child who grew up in a home filled with judgment and criticism, where mistakes were met with shame instead of understanding. That child might become an adult who is terrified of failure, who sets impossibly high standards for themselves, who hears a relentless inner critic saying, "You're not good enough," every time they try something new. What began as a childhood defense mechanism becomes a life pattern, not because we want to suffer, but because the unconscious always seeks what's familiar, even if that familiarity brings pain. This is not about blaming our parents for every hardship we face. They too were shaped by their own stories, their own wounds, their own limited understanding of love. But it is about facing the truth. Our early experiences have impacted us more than we often realize, and until we bring that truth into the light, we will continue to relive the same emotional patterns again and again. So how do we recognize whether these childhood wounds are still alive within us? This is where the true journey inward begins, because these wounds, though invisible, are not silent. They speak through our behaviors, our relationships, our fears, and our anxieties. They show up in our struggles to trust, to express ourselves, to feel worthy. They appear in our perfectionism, our fear of rejection, our tendency to sabotage happiness the moment it feels real. Time alone doesn't heal these wounds. Denying them doesn't make them go away. Only by looking inward, with honesty and compassion, can we begin to understand where our pain comes from and how to begin healing it. This path isn't easy. It requires us to revisit the past, to feel things we've spent years avoiding, to unlearn what was never true. But in doing so, we begin to reclaim our power. We stop being controlled by old programs and begin to write a new story, one that is conscious, free, and rooted in self-awareness. Carl Jung taught us that the unconscious does not remain in the darkness forever. Sooner or later, it seeks to express itself, and if we don't face it consciously, it will find its way to the surface, through our emotions, our life patterns, and even in our dreams. The unconscious is not silent. It waits for the moment to be seen, to be heard, and if we keep ignoring it, it will speak louder each time, through confusion, emotional chaos, and repeated suffering. One of the first signs of an unresolved wound is the presence of triggering emotions. Think about it. Have you ever found yourself reacting strongly, maybe even explosively, to something that, on the surface, seemed minor or insignificant. Chances are, you weren't just reacting to what was happening in the present. You were responding to something much older, something hidden deep within you. For instance, if someone offers you a simple critique and you immediately feel anger, sadness, or a desperate urge to defend yourself, it may not be about what they said at all. It may be because during your childhood, you were taught, either through words or actions, that love and acceptance were conditional, that your worth depended on your performance. So now, every time you face criticism, your unconscious mind perceives it as a threat to your self-worth. It triggers the same insecurity you felt when you were a child, vulnerable and desperate to be seen as enough. Another powerful sign of unhealed wounds is the repetition of life patterns. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This means that if we do not heal what hurt us, we will continue to live it over and over again. It will return in different forms, different people, different places, but the pain will be the same. People who grew up with a deep fear of abandonment, for example, often find themselves in relationships where they constantly feel the need to prove they are lovable. They may overextend themselves, tolerate emotional neglect, or fall in love with people who are distant and unavailable, recreating, without realizing it, the emotional vacuum of their childhood. Others may find themselves sabotaging their own success because deep down they believe they don't deserve happiness, that joy and fulfillment are not meant for them. But there is an even deeper way that our unconscious communicates with us, through dreams. Jung believed dreams are symbolic messages from the unconscious. They are like letters from our inner world, revealing what our conscious mind refuses to see. A dream where you're being chased, for example, may symbolize a repressed emotion or unresolved fear that you're trying to avoid. Dreaming of a collapsing or abandoned house might represent a part of your psyche that feels neglected or broken, an inner structure that is falling apart and needs rebuilding. Even the appearance of authority figures in dreams can signal unresolved emotions related to your relationship with your parents. If you're someone who constantly seeks the approval of others, it could mean that, as a child, you never felt truly accepted by your parents. If you feel a compulsive need to control every aspect of your life, perhaps you grew up in an environment filled with chaos, and your nervous system learned to equate safety with control. Everything we do in the present has roots in our past. Every reaction, every fear, every compulsive behavior is tied to a moment, often long forgotten, that shaped how we see the world. But recognizing the wound is only the beginning. Healing is far more complex. There is something that makes this process even more difficult: the shadow. The shadow is the hidden side of our psyche, the part of ourselves we deny, reject, or simply don't want to see. Yet, it still affects us, silently but powerfully. When we think of our parents, we often fall into extremes. We either idealize them, convincing ourselves that they did the best they could, or we demonize them, blaming them entirely for our suffering. But the truth lies somewhere in between. Our parents were human beings, flawed, wounded, and shaped by their own unresolved pain. They too had shadows. They too carried fears that governed their behavior. And without knowing it, many of those shadows were passed down to us, not genetically, but emotionally and behaviorally. We inherit not only eye color or personality traits, but emotional patterns. We inherit silence, shame, emotional coldness, anxiety, overprotection, and the inability to express love freely. The things they could not heal often become the wounds we are left to confront, and unless we choose to face them, to look into the shadow and bring light to what has been hidden, we will continue to repeat the cycle. We will keep wondering why life feels heavy, why our relationships hurt, and why peace seems so distant. Carl Jung defined the shadow as the hidden side of our psyche, those parts of ourselves that we have repressed because we've learned to see them as unacceptable, shameful, or too painful to acknowledge. These are fragments of our personality that we've buried deep in the unconscious, often because, at some point in our lives, someone, perhaps a parent, a teacher, or society itself, told us that these traits were wrong or undesirable. But what we suppress does not vanish. It lingers in the shadows, operating silently, subtly shaping our choices, our relationships, and even our very identity. This same dynamic often manifests in how we perceive our parents. Many of us grow up denying their flaws, not because we don't see them, but because recognizing them hurts. Admitting that our parents made mistakes would mean accepting that the very people who were supposed to love and protect us may have also hurt or failed us. And that's an excruciating truth to face. In some cases, we swing to the opposite extreme, demonizing our parents, turning them into villains in our internal narrative, and clinging to resentment as a form of emotional armor. But here's the paradox. Even when we resent them, we remain emotionally tied to them through that very resentment. We're still bound to them, still haunted by their influence, still reacting to wounds left unhealed. Yet the family shadow goes beyond how we see our parents. It's also embedded in the patterns and behaviors we've unconsciously inherited. Perhaps we were raised by an emotionally distant father, and we've spent our lives rejecting that coldness, vowing to be different. But if we're brutally honest, how often do we withhold our emotions? How many times have we created distance in our relationships without realizing it? The truth is, what we most resent in our parents often mirrors what we've internalized in ourselves. It's easier to see their mistakes than to confront the ways we've replicated them. It's simpler to say, "My mother didn't know how to love," than to ask ourselves, in what ways do I also struggle to express love? It's easier to blame our father for being overly critical than to acknowledge how harsh we've become with ourselves or with others. The shadow isn't just what we hate about our parents. It's also what we unknowingly carry forward, what we repeat, what we become. And until we bring these unconscious truths into the light, we remain trapped in cycles of repetition, living out the same pain, making the same choices, becoming the very people we swore we'd never be. When we're not aware of our shadow, we project it onto others. This is where the psychological mechanism of projection comes into play. One of the most subtle yet powerful ways the unconscious forces us to face what we don't want to see. Carl Jung explained that we project onto others the parts of ourselves we cannot accept. In other words, what we refuse to acknowledge within, we begin to see outside of us, in the behaviors of others, in our partners, our friends, our children. Projection is the unconscious mind's defense. It shields us from the pain of self-confrontation by making the problem appear external. But this also keeps us stuck. When we don't make our wounds conscious, we are doomed to repeat them, often without even realizing it. Consider this. If we were raised by excessively demanding parents, we might grow into adults who push ourselves relentlessly, never feeling good enough, never allowing ourselves rest. Or we might become critical of others, echoing the harsh voices from our past. If we grew up in an environment where love was inconsistent, where one day we felt embraced and the next ignored, we may now find ourselves attracted to chaotic relationships, drawn to emotional highs and lows that feel disturbingly familiar. We may complain about feeling unloved or abandoned, unaware that we are choosing relationships that replicate the emotional instability we once knew. This is no coincidence. The unconscious seeks what is familiar, even if it hurts. There is a powerful exercise worth trying. Think about the traits in your parents that bothered you the most. Were they authoritarian, emotionally unavailable, cold, or dismissive? Now ask yourself with raw honesty, in what ways have I adopted those same behaviors? Perhaps not in obvious ways, but in small habits, in how you speak to yourself, in how you treat others. What we reject in our parents often becomes what we unknowingly carry within. And what's most ironic is that many of us are unconsciously drawn to people who resemble our parents, hoping deep down to rewrite the story, to heal the original wound by reliving it in a different way. But healing doesn't come from repeating the pattern. It comes from breaking it. Recognizing these patterns is only the first step. True healing requires something deeper, a conscious journey toward what Jung called individuation. This is the process through which we integrate all parts of our psyche and become whole. It's how we move beyond the injuries and limitations of our past and step into the person we were always meant to be. Healing does not mean forgetting what happened. It doesn't mean justifying the pain or pretending everything was okay. Healing means we no longer allow our history to control us. It means reclaiming our power, our agency, our identity. Individuation, according to Jung, is about becoming your most authentic self. It's not about being perfect. It's about being whole. But this journey is not automatic. It requires deep, conscious work. We must be willing to face what we've spent years avoiding. We must look within and confront the inner child still carrying wounds that were never validated, never soothed. There are 4 essential steps on this path. Acknowledge the wound without victimhood. We cannot heal what we don't recognize. This means admitting that our childhood left marks, some subtle, some deep. It's not about blaming our parents forever or staying trapped in anger. It's about giving our pain a name. But the wound should not define us. We are not just the wounded child. We are much more than our suffering. Embrace the shadow without fear. What we reject in ourselves often ends up controlling us. Jung believed that unless we confront our shadow, we will keep projecting it onto the world. That means accepting that, in many ways, we have repeated what once hurt us. Maybe we vowed not to become like our parents, but we've found ourselves in eerily similar patterns. The key is not self-punishment. It's awareness and the conscious choice to change course. Free ourselves from projection and see our parents with clarity. Real healing happens when we stop viewing our parents through the eyes of the wounded child. Neither idealize them nor vilify them. Understand them. They too were shaped by their own pain and limitations. This doesn't excuse their actions, but it does humanize them. True freedom begins when we stop expecting them to be different and instead give ourselves the love and validation we once sought from them. Consciously decide who we want to be. This is the most crucial step. We cannot change our childhood, but we can choose how we respond to it. Will we continue living out unconscious patterns, or will we reclaim authorship over our story? Individuation is about becoming the person we choose to be, not the person our wounds created. Many people have turned their pain into power. Those who suffered abandonment have learned to support themselves with love. Those who feared rejection discovered that their worth is not up for negotiation. Those who felt they were never enough have realized that the only approval they need is their own. And yet, there remains one final profound step in this process, the most difficult, but also the most transformative: forgiveness. Not as a favor to our parents, not because they deserve it, but as a gift to ourselves. Forgiveness is not about forgetting or minimizing the pain. It is not about saying, "It wasn't that bad." Forgiveness, in its purest form, is a form of personal liberation. It is the moment we stop carrying the weight of the past, the moment we set ourselves free. Carl Jung spoke of the process of integration, a deep inner journey that invites us to see our personal history with unflinching clarity, stripped of both victimhood and denial. It's not about painting ourselves as helpless or pretending nothing happened. Instead, it's about facing the truth as it is. In this process, we stop idealizing our parents as flawless heroes or condemning them as ruthless villains. We begin to see them for what they truly are: human beings, humans with their own wounds, their own shadows, their own emotional limitations. So often, we carry a silent resentment we don't even realize is hurting us. It festers quietly, shaping our thoughts and relationships. We hold on to the idea that our parents should have been different, that they should have known better, should have done more, should have loved more consciously. And while that feeling is deeply valid, born from very real emotional needs, the truth remains: the past cannot be rewritten. Waiting for emotional justice, waiting for the apology that may never come, only extends our suffering and delays our healing. True forgiveness is not about convincing ourselves that the pain inflicted upon us was somehow okay. It's not about erasing what happened. Forgiveness begins when we decide we no longer want that pain to shape our lives. It happens when we refuse to let the past keep dictating our present. A person with an emotionally absent father, for example, may spend a lifetime consumed by resentment, feeling abandoned, and constantly asking why they were never loved the way they needed. But that person also has the power to pause, to reflect, and to ask themselves a different question. Who was my father before he became my father? What story shaped him? What emotional wounds did he carry long before I ever entered the picture? Jung reminded us of a powerful truth: what we fail to integrate will continue to repeat itself. If we remain shackled to anger and blame, it is likely that the same unresolved pain will continue showing up in our relationships and patterns. If we are constantly waiting for our parents to acknowledge the damage they caused, we are still giving them control over our emotions and our healing. Taking back that power means choosing to look inward instead. There is a powerful practice that can help us with this process. It begins with writing a letter, raw, honest, uncensored. Say everything you've ever wanted to say. Speak from your pain, from your anger, from your sadness. Don't hold anything back. Then, take a second sheet of paper and write a response as if you were your parent, not to excuse their actions, but to see their story from a new perspective. Try to understand what they might have felt, what they might have gone through, what emotional burdens they carried. This exercise is not about justifying what they did. It's about releasing the emotional weight we've been holding for so long. It's about realizing that healing is a journey we must choose to walk ourselves. At the end of the day, the responsibility for our healing does not belong to anyone else. It belongs to us. And there is one final lesson that has the power to transform your life forever. How to turn your pain into wisdom. Because true transformation is not just about letting go of the past. It's about using that past to create a more conscious and authentic life. You cannot change what happened, but you can choose what you will do with it. Childhood leaves marks. Some are visible. Others are hidden deep within the unconscious. We spend years trying to make sense of it all, trying to understand why our parents were the way they were, why they hurt us, why they never gave us what we so desperately needed. But there comes a point in every journey when a choice must be made. Will we continue to be prisoners of our story, or will we choose to transform the pain into wisdom? Carl Jung taught us that true growth occurs when we stop running from our shadow and begin to embrace it. The same principle applies to our past. It's not about ignoring what happened. It's not about staying stuck in resentment. It's about looking at our history with new eyes. It's about turning every scar into fuel for transformation. That childhood wound, the one that left you feeling abandoned, unworthy, unseen, can become the very force that helps you grow. If you were never emotionally supported, you can learn to be the one who holds yourself with tenderness. If you were told you were not enough, you can now become the one who affirms your worth without waiting for anyone else's validation. If you grew up in an emotionally cold environment, you have the power to break that cycle and become someone who loves with presence and awareness. Nothing you experienced was in vain. Every moment, every tear, every disappointment carries within it the potential to become a source of strength and understanding. What hurt you does not have to define you, but what you do with that pain, how you choose to carry it forward, that can define everything. And now, the question remains, what will you do with what you've just uncovered? If this message resonated with you, it's not by accident. Something inside you is ready to heal, ready to evolve. Maybe you can't change the past, but you can change your relationship with it. And in that choice, in that shift, lies the real freedom. If this message resonated with you and you believe someone else needs to hear it too, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video, and help us reach more people who are ready to heal, grow, and reclaim their lives. Remember, your past does not define you. Your choices do. You have the power to turn your pain into purpose, your wounds into wisdom, and your story into a source of light for others. Keep going. You're not alone, and your healing journey has already begun.
Rejection is one of the most painful and universal experiences a human being can endure. Throughout history, the need for acceptance has been a cornerstone of the collective psyche. From childhood, we seek validation from our caregivers, friends, and authority figures. But what happens when that validation never arrives? How does our self-perception shift when we face rejection in love, work, or personal relationships? Carl Gustav Jung, in his profound exploration of the unconscious, offers us a groundbreaking perspective. Rejection is not just an isolated event, but a reflection of our own hidden shadows, the aspects of ourselves we suppress out of fear of not being accepted. But what if rejection was never the enemy? What if, instead of being a wound, it was actually an opportunity for self-discovery and transformation? The fear of rejection is one of the deepest emotional wounds we carry, both individually and as a society. Not being chosen, not being validated, feeling excluded. These experiences strike at our very core. We have been conditioned to equate rejection with failure, but Jung challenges us to look deeper. To him, everything that disturbs us holds a hidden message waiting to be deciphered. It is within the shadows that our deepest truths are concealed, and paradoxically, where our greatest power also resides. Imagine this everyday scenario. You send a message to someone important to you, but you don't receive an immediate response. Within seconds, your mind begins spinning narratives. They don't care about me. Did I say something wrong? Maybe they don't want to talk to me anymore. In just a few minutes, a simple lack of response triggers a storm of insecurities and doubts. This is the power of rejection. It reactivates old wounds, ones that were formed in childhood and reinforced over time. But what if, instead of allowing ourselves to be consumed by these emotions, we use rejection as a tool for self-awareness? What if we could transform anguish into an opportunity to strengthen our relationship with ourselves? Reverse psychology offers a revolutionary approach. Instead of resisting rejection or begging for validation, it invites us to shift our perception. Jung spoke of the importance of integrating the shadow, that is, acknowledging and embracing the parts of ourselves that we fear or deny. If rejection makes us feel unworthy, instead of running from that feeling, we could ask ourselves, why am I seeking this external validation? What parts of myself am I failing to value? This is where rejection transforms from an adversary into a teacher. Instead of viewing it as an obstacle, we can use it as a mirror. Every time we feel rejected, we have the chance to examine our limiting beliefs. Are we truly less valuable just because someone dismissed us? Or are we simply projecting onto others the power to define our worth? Think about it for a moment. How many times have you changed your behavior or overextended yourself just to avoid rejection? We adapt, we reshape ourselves, and too often we abandon our authenticity just to fit in. But this constant pursuit of approval can become a dangerous trap. Jung reminds us that true transformation happens when we stop searching for answers outside ourselves and instead turn inward to discover what has always been within. Rather than seeing rejection as an ending, we can begin to view it as the start of something new, an opportunity to rediscover ourselves, build unshakable self-worth, and remember that our value is not determined by external approval. Accepting our shadow, integrating our wounds, and embracing the uncertainty that rejection brings can lead us to a more fulfilling and authentic life. The real question is, how do we apply this wisdom in our daily lives? We can start by changing our relationship with rejection so that it stops being a burden and instead becomes a powerful tool for growth. The first step is self-awareness. Each time we experience the sting of rejection, instead of reacting impulsively, we can pause and ask ourselves, what is this moment revealing about me? What hidden fears, insecurities, or patterns are being exposed? The second step is to practice radical self-acceptance. Instead of desperately seeking validation from others, we can invest in building an inner foundation of self-love that remains steady regardless of external circumstances. And finally, we can use reverse psychology to shift our mindset. If someone rejects us, instead of seeing it as a loss, we can see it as a redirection towards something greater. Rejection is not a punishment. It is a golden opportunity to deepen our self-awareness. In this journey of self-discovery, there is no better guide than our own shadow. As Jung famously said, what you deny enslaves you, what you accept transforms you. Are you ready to turn rejection into your greatest ally? Reverse psychology is a tool that, when applied consciously, can completely change how we experience rejection and the emotions tied to it. Jung taught that the shadow, the suppressed, unacknowledged parts of ourselves, is not something to be eliminated, but rather something to be integrated. Reverse psychology can serve as the bridge for this integration. When faced with rejection, our instinct is to resist. We want to be accepted, validated, and loved. However, by using reverse psychology, we can reframe rejection and use that same energy to empower ourselves rather than allowing it to weaken us. Psychological studies have shown that individuals who cultivate emotional detachment consciously tend to develop greater resilience and a more stable sense of self-worth. One of the core principles of reverse psychology, when applied to rejection, is the theory of cognitive reappraisal. This theory suggests that how we interpret an emotionally painful experience can determine its long-term impact. If, instead of perceiving rejection as a statement about our worth, we view it as an opportunity for expansion and personal evolution, we take back our power. Rejection no longer defines us. It fuels our growth. Jung believed that the soul requires freedom to evolve, and part of that freedom comes from releasing the need for external validation. The ability to let go is fundamental in this process. In our daily lives, we often cling to relationships, jobs, or friendships that no longer contribute to our well-being, simply out of fear of rejection or loneliness. However, reverse psychology offers us a way to break free from these mental chains. When we stop insisting on something that causes us suffering, we experience an inner liberation that opens doors to new possibilities. Psychological techniques like Viktor Frankl's paradoxical intention illustrate this concept in action. Frankl proposed that when we stop fearing something and instead embrace it, its power over us diminishes. For instance, if we are afraid of rejection rather than avoiding situations that might expose us to it, we can face them with detachment. By doing so, we reduce emotional distress and gain a sense of empowerment. Another relevant study comes from Carol Dweck's research on the growth mindset. Her findings revealed that individuals who perceive challenges as opportunities for learning rather than fixed failures are more likely to overcome emotional struggles and develop greater self-confidence. Applying this principle to rejection allows us to view it not as a measure of our worth, but as a valuable lesson in personal growth. From Jung's perspective, releasing the need for external validation creates space for self-discovery. The shadow, instead of being an enemy, becomes a teacher. In this sense, reverse psychology acts as a tool to shift our focus from external approval to inner strength, enabling us to uncover our true power. This shift in perspective allows us to rewrite our internal narrative. Instead of seeing ourselves as victims of rejection, we recognize ourselves as individuals in continuous transformation. This new outlook strengthens our sense of identity, liberates us from paralyzing fears, and connects us with an authenticity that naturally attracts relationships and experiences aligned with our true essence. The paradox of reverse psychology lies in the fact that the moment we stop desperately seeking approval, we become more appealing to others. However, this attraction is not based on manipulation, but on genuineness. When we are comfortable in our own skin, we radiate an energy that fosters more authentic and fulfilling interactions. Integrating reverse psychology into our lives allows us to transform rejection into a powerful tool for personal growth. It helps us release our attachment to external validation, reinterpret our experiences, and connect with our true essence. As Jung stated, "What you resist persists." By embracing rejection as a natural part of life, we strip it of its destructive power and turn it into fuel for our personal evolution. Throughout this journey, we have explored how rejection, rather than being a roadblock, can actually become a turning point in our lives. Jung taught us that not everything happens by chance. Certain events are deeply intertwined with our psyche and may serve as signals that internal change is necessary. When we shift our perspective on rejection, seeing it not as an enemy but as a guide, we unlock its potential for transformation. This is where reverse psychology plays a crucial role. The moment we let go of the need for external approval and begin to focus on our own authenticity, our energy shifts. The paradox is clear. When we stop trying to hold on, we naturally become more attractive, more magnetic. This isn't just a psychological trick. It happens because we align with our essence and stop living from a place of fear. But how do we apply this in everyday life? Here are some effective practices to help you integrate this mindset. Reframe your internal narrative. Whenever you face rejection, pause and question yourself. Is this truly a failure, or is it an opportunity to redirect your path? The way we interpret experiences shapes their impact on us. A no. Today may be the redirection we need to discover something even greater tomorrow. Observe synchronicity. Do not view rejection as a mere coincidence. Ask yourself, what is this situation trying to teach me? Where is it guiding me? Often, when we reflect on past events, we realize that a door closing at the right moment led us to something far better. Paying attention to these patterns can reveal profound insights about our journey. Practice emotional detachment. Letting go does not mean suppressing emotions. Rather, it means learning not to depend on external validation. The key is to give yourself the recognition you often seek from others. Dedicate a few moments each day to acknowledge your own worth, independent of outside approval. When you build self-assurance from within, rejection loses its sting. Transform resistance into acceptance. Jung emphasized that resistance only strengthens what we are trying to avoid. Instead of fighting rejection or the pain it causes, allow yourself to fully experience it, understand it, and then move forward with a renewed perspective. Acceptance is the bridge to growth. Live authentically. When you stop acting to please others and start expressing yourself genuinely, the right people naturally gravitate toward you. Instead of forcing situations, flow with life and trust that what is meant for you will find its way to you at the perfect time. Ultimately, rejection is not an endpoint. It is a catalyst. The moment you stop fearing it, you unlock a new level of freedom, confidence, and alignment with your highest self. Jung left us with a profound lesson. Those who look outside dream, but those who look inside awaken. And that is exactly what we're doing here, awakening. Understanding that every experience, even rejection, is a doorway to discovering our truth and aligning with our deepest purpose. The key is not to avoid rejection, but to decode its meaning and turn it into an advantage. So, how will you transform your next rejection into an opportunity for growth? Throughout life, we encounter rejection in many forms. Romantic setbacks, career disappointments, unfulfilled aspirations, even within our own families. In those moments, it is natural to feel lost, discouraged, or even question our worth. However, when we shift our perspective and view these experiences through the lens of synchronicity and reverse psychology, we realize they are not mere roadblocks, but hidden opportunities in disguise. Synchronicity teaches us that every significant event in our lives is intertwined with our inner world. Jung believed that nothing happens by chance. Rather, the universe mirrors our emotions, thoughts, and energy. This means that when we face rejection, instead of perceiving it as a punishment or proof of inadequacy, we can see it as a sign, a nudge from the universe, redirecting us toward a path that is more aligned with who we truly are. This is where reverse psychology becomes a powerful tool. Instead of resisting rejection or seeking external validation at all costs, we can do the opposite. Embrace it with calmness and detach from the need for approval. By doing so, we reclaim our personal power. In other words, the moment we stop trying to prove our worth to others and start affirming it within ourselves, our entire energy shifts. This internal transformation not only strengthens our self-esteem, but also makes us naturally more magnetic and compelling to those around us. When we adopt this mindset, rejection is no longer a source of suffering. It becomes a turning point. We can ask ourselves key questions. What is this experience trying to teach me? How can I grow from this? Is there something within me that needs to be strengthened before I move forward? Instead of getting stuck in frustration, we can use rejection as a guide, pointing us towards something better. Practicing reverse psychology in these situations means learning to flow with life's events rather than resisting them. When we cling to a relationship that no longer serves us, a job that fails to fulfill us, or an outdated self-image that no longer defines who we are, we only invite more suffering into our lives. However, when we accept that life is guiding us towards something greater and open ourselves to new possibilities, we experience profound and authentic growth. Jung famously said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." Applying this principle in the context of rejection means shifting our focus inward, exploring our emotions, and uncovering what we truly desire. When we do this, rejection ceases to be a roadblock and instead transforms into a mentor, guiding us toward personal evolution. Ultimately, when we release the need for external approval and embrace the idea that everything happens for a reason, we unlock a newfound sense of freedom. We come to realize that we don't need validation from the world to feel whole. It is in the state of authenticity and self-assurance that we begin to attract experiences that genuinely align with our essence. So the next time you face rejection, remember, this is not the end. It is an invitation to grow, to trust the process, and to allow life to lead you toward what truly belongs to you. Rejection is not a dead end, but a message from the universe, redirecting your energy towards something more in tune with your destiny. Have you ever experienced a moment where rejection led you to something even better? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content on deep psychology and personal transformation. See you in the next video.
Most people think the conflict between generations is about technology, fashion, or slang. Well, it isn't. It's about meaning, about who gets to define reality. And nothing threatens an old definition like a young person who finally sees clearly. Ask any therapist who works with families. The moment a teenager or 20-something starts therapy, the household barometer swings wildly. Elders roll their eyes. They whisper that psychologists put ideas in their heads, that healers make youngsters uncontrollable, that therapy breaks families and teaches them to be selfish. Some will even point to divorces or dramatic life pivots and say, "See, therapy ruined everything." But here's the thing the elders miss. Therapy didn't plant rebellion. It took off the pink glasses. When a young person starts naming what they feel, what they've carried, and what is theirs versus what was projected onto them, they stop cooperating with the family myth. The old story, suffer in silence, survive and respect authority because it's older, no longer hypnotizes them. And of course that looks like defiance from the outside. Of course it looks like danger. It is danger to illusions. Carl Jung would say this isn't a moral failure, it's a symbolic event, an archetypal clash. The wise old figure in the psyche, the senex, meets the eternal youth, the pure. The senex wants order, duty, tradition, and predictability. The pure wants possibility, authenticity, and air. When a culture or a family leans too hard into one pole, the other erupts. Therapy, when it's honest, doesn't create the pure. It gives the pure a language. Suddenly, the good kid with the polished persona starts asking questions the mask can't answer. That's when elders feel threatened. Because the youngsters' questions don't just challenge rules. They uncover the family's shadow, the parts no one wanted to see. The drinking that was called just stress. The rage labeled strict love. The manipulation named sacrifice. The enmeshment praised as loyalty. When the shadow is named, the old bargain breaks. We'll love you if you don't make us look at ourselves. Now love must evolve, or it calcifies. So elders mock therapy, not always from malice, but from fear. A fear Jung knew well. When the self begins to reorganize a life around truth instead of compliance, the old ego structures tremble. Elders sense it instinctively. If this young person claims their voice, where does that leave my authority? If they set boundaries, what happens to the story in which my suffering earned me obedience? If they pursue peace more than appearances, what happens to our family's identity? Listen to the accusations carefully and you'll hear the archetypes speaking. Therapy makes them uncontrollable. Translation: the senex in me has lost command over the household. Healers teach them to leave. Translation: the pure is finally allowed to individuate. Everything fell apart after therapy. Translation: the persona fractured because it could no longer contain the truth. But growth often looks like breaking before it looks like building. Jung called it individuation, the long, messy process of becoming a whole person rather than a role. Sometimes that means divorces happen, not because therapy poisons love, but because it exposes a contract that was never love to begin with. Sometimes that means a young adult moves out, changes careers, ends a legacy of silence. Elders witness the collapse of the old scaffolding and call it catastrophe. The psyche calls it re-foundation. Respect your elders becomes complicated here. Respect is not worship. Age can bring wisdom, but age alone is not wisdom. In the old world, survival demanded submission. Questions were luxuries. In the modern world, Information and mental health tools let the young test inherited truths. Many are wiser earlier because the mirrors arrived earlier. They aren't less respectful, they're respectful differently. They'll bow to truth, not to fear. They'll honor sacrifices, but not at the cost of repeating them blindly. Jung would nudge both sides toward humility. The Senex without warmth becomes tyrant. The poor without grounding becomes fugitive. The task is not to abolish the elder or enthrone the youth. It's to let the living young renovate what the dead old built, without desecrating either. Therapy, at its best, invites that renovation. It names the load-bearing lies. It distinguishes loyalty from self-abandonment. It refuses the false choice between family and freedom, insisting on mature love that can tolerate truth. So no, therapy isn't evil. It's a lantern in a room the family kept dim. And yes, once the light is on, people move the furniture. Some even leave the house. That can be grief. It can also be grace. Because what elders call rebellion might be the soul's first breath of clean air. And here's what that air actually is in Jungian terms. When a young person begins to speak clearly, the family shadow starts to flicker on the walls. The shadow is everything a group refuses to see about itself, the control it renamed care, the dependency it called sacrifice, the favoritism it hid under tradition. Therapy doesn't invent these dynamics, it labels them. And once something is named, it demands arrangement. That rearrangement is what elders experience as disrespect. Why does it feel personal? Because of complexes. In Jung's language, a complex is a knot of emotion, memory, and meaning that behaves like a mini personality. Many parents carry a mother complex or father complex shaped by their own childhood. Good children don't talk back. Family unity is survival. Love equals obedience. When a son or daughter says, "I love you and I'm setting a boundary," that sentence presses directly on an old nerve. The parent's complex leaps to defend itself. "You are abandoning me. You're saying I was a bad parent. You're rejecting our way of life." The young person is reorganizing their psyche. The elder's complex hears an indictment. Enter the persona, the social mask. Every family has one. We are respectable. We are long-suffering. We don't air our problems. The persona is useful in public but suffocating in private. Therapy turns down the persona's microphone so the self, the deeper organizing center, can speak. The self says things like, "Truth is kinder than pretending," and "Peace without honesty is paralysis." Masks don't like that voice. Masks prefer applause to authenticity. So when the mask slips, elders rush to reposition it. Don't tell the therapist everything. Don't exaggerate. Don't be dramatic. Translation: don't disturb the costume that keeps us safe. There's also a culture-level layer, a cultural complex. In many societies, the Senex, old wise man energy has been inflated, endurance admired, silence rewarded, hierarchy unquestioned. The poor, eternal youth is tolerated only as entertainment, not as a moral force. But modernization, information, and mental health language have amplified the poor's voice. Younger people have mirrors that previous generations didn't. Trauma education, vocabulary for boundaries, communities that normalize healing. The cultural complex hears this as an uprising. It answers with cliches. Kids these days are soft. Therapy makes everyone a victim. Back in my day, those phrases are not wisdom. They're defense mechanisms dressed as nostalgia. Jung warned about enantiodromia, the psyche's tendency to flip into the opposite when one side is overdone. Decades of shut up and survive produce a counter-movement of speak and heal. If the pendulum swings, it is not proof of corruption, it's proof of physics. The task isn't to freeze the pendulum, but to integrate its wisdom, stamina and sensitivity, loyalty and limits. This is where boundaries come in. Boundaries aren't punishments, they're architecture. I won't accept name-calling. We can discuss, not shout. I will visit if my autonomy is respected. These lines don't attack elders. They describe conditions for connection. Yet, to an authority organized around compliance, any condition feels like mutiny. The elder's complex shouts, "You're controlling me." In fact, something healthier is happening. Two adults are negotiating reality instead of reenacting an old parent-child script. Does therapy break families? Sometimes it exposes that the family system was organized around an illness, addiction, secrecy, a scapegoat child. When the identified patient stops carrying the symptom, the system wobbles. If the group refuses to rebalance, relationships may end. That's tragic, but it's also honest. Jung would insist that what dissolves under truth was never whole. It was only welded. Consider a simple scene. A daughter returns from therapy and says, "When you joke about my body, I feel small. Please, stop." The father laughs it off and replies, "We're just teasing in this family." The shadow has been named. The persona performs. The daughter repeats the boundary. Tension rises. In Jungian terms, the complex defending the old order has been constellated. Two paths open. The family can metabolize shame into humility, or it can project shame back onto the daughter. You've changed. Therapy made you sensitive. If humility is chosen, a new pattern is born. If projection is chosen, estrangement grows, not because therapy is evil, but because truth was refused. And what about respect? Respect is not age worship, it's reality-based relating. The young can respect what the elders endured without inheriting their coping as commandments. Elders can respect the young's clarity without interpreting it as contempt. Mutual respect sounds like this. Thank you for building what you could with the tools you had, and thank you for building what we couldn't with the tools you now have. Underneath the mockery of therapy is grief. Elders grieve a world where roles guaranteed meaning. Young people grieve the love they thought they had to buy with silence. Naming this grief doesn't weaken anyone, it humanizes everyone. There is no villain here, only strategies that have expired. The self, not the ego, is the real elder. It asks for a rite of passage, from obedience to conscience, from secrecy to sincerity, from legacy to living truth. That passage can include raised voices, slammed doors, and awkward holidays. But it can also include the first honest hug a family has never known. So, practically, how do we walk it? For elders, start with curiosity over control. Replace, "Why are you doing this to us?" with, "What truth are you serving?" Curiosity signals safety. Safety invites honesty. Second, practice shadow ownership. Try, "I was taught that respect equals silence. I've enforced that. I'm willing to learn another way." That sentence de-arms the room more than any lecture. Third, differentiate love from management. If you find yourself negotiating connection only when rules are obeyed, pause and ask, "Am I loving a person or a performance?" Fourth, apologize without a courtroom. Not, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," but "I'm sorry I hurt you." Accountability is not self-annihilation, it's emotional adulthood. Fifth, update the myth. Name a new family value out loud. In this house, we tell the truth kindly, even when it's inconvenient. Ritualize it. Light a candle at dinner and share one honest sentence each. Small rituals create new neural roads. For the younger generation, start by trading superiority for service to truth. The goal isn't to win, it's to heal. Speak as a collaborator, not a prosecutor. Here's what would help me stay close to you. Lands better than "you're toxic." Use the simplest tools well. When X happens, I feel Y, so I'll do Z. Keep boundaries specific and repeatable. Offer replacements, not just refusals. I won't discuss my therapy details, but I'd love to share what I'm learning about myself when I'm ready. Titrate change. Don't try to remodel the whole house in 1 week. Expect backlash, don't personalize it. You are disrupting an inherited survival code. Build a support net beyond the family, friends, groups, mentors, so that home is not your only oxygen. Both sides can agree to consent-based conversation. Ask, is this a good time? If not, set time limits. End with appreciation, even if small. Thanks for trying keeps the bridge from burning. And when shame floods the room, name it. Say, I'm feeling defensive right now. Can we slow down? Shame metabolized becomes humility. Shame denied becomes hostility. Jung would remind us, the psyche seeks wholeness. That means the senex and the poor must learn to dance. Elders bring ballast, memory, endurance, continuity. The young bring wind, vision, revision, courage to try. Ballast without wind is stagnation. Wind without ballast is a wreck. Together, they become a vessel. If you need a mantra for the passage, try truth over role, love over pride, repair over winning, pace over haste. And when in doubt, ask the self, not the frightened ego, what is the most honest next step that preserves dignity on both sides? Sometimes it's a boundary. Sometimes it's a soft question. Sometimes it's a walk. The first honest hug won't erase the past, but it can begin a future. Not the old world of silence, not a new world of contempt, but something wiser. A family myth where respect is earned by courage and kept by compassion, and where growing up doesn't mean growing apart. It means growing true. So here's the truth beneath the noise. The war between elders and the young isn't about disrespect, it's about reality updating itself. When the self becomes the true elder, families move from roles to relationships, from silence to sincerity. That shift can sting, but it's how love grows up. If you're in the middle of it, remember, ballast and wind need each other. Honor what was built. Protect what must be born. Choose truth over performance, repair over winning, and the next honest step over the perfect plan. That's how generational courage becomes generational wisdom. And now, I'd love to hear from you. What old rule are you ready to retire? And what new value will you build in its place? Share it in the comments. If this helped, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom for more deep dives into psychology, shadow work, individuation, relationships, trauma healing, and spiritual growth. Practical insights to help you live more truthfully, love more bravely, and become whole. See you in the next journey.